You're now listening to All Hog Sports, covering all Arkansas Razorback sports, such as football, basketball, baseball, and much more. Now, here's your host for today's show, Sam Stimson.
It has been 3 days since Saturday's game against Auburn, and I'm still upset. But regardless of that, the Arkansas Razorbacks are moving on to face Ole Miss here at Fayetteville. They got to be fired up after the call from those officials and the officials up at the SEC. But anyway, if you like what you're hearing on today's episode, please subscribe to me on whatever platform you're listening to and follow me at All Hog Sports Pod on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Facebook, and much more. And please share the podcast and also leave a 5-star review. Now, the game day information: Ole Miss is 1-2. They beat Kentucky and lost to Alabama and Florida, while Arkansas is technically 1-2 with a win over Mississippi State and losing to Georgia and Auburn. The game's 2:30 on ESPN2, and there should be some nice weather for this matchup as well. The Hogs coming off of the Auburn loss, screwed by the SEC there, and Ole Miss is coming off of a game where they competed with Bama for most of the game, but kicking it off with the good guys, the Arkansas Razorbacks. They should be 2-1, but whatever. I talked about that in my last episode, so if you didn't get a chance to listen to that, I'd go listen to that after this episode so you can hear my thoughts on the Auburn game and the officiating there. But anyway, the offense is improving, averaging 19.7 points per game. You got to keep in mind that we played Georgia, and Georgia's pretty good, and the offense has been struggling a little bit, but Felipe Franks is balling out. I've seen a lot of doubters against this guy from around the SEC, from around Florida fans, and just overall in the media, but there's no reason. He is having a great season. He threw a great game against Auburn, and he is 61 out of 94 with 730 yards and 2 interceptions. Looked really good on that game. He has a 78.6 QBR this season. He's averaging 7.8 yards per pass and averaging 244 yards per game. I don't know why there's a lot of people doubting him still. He definitely has the talent. He can execute this Briles offense really well, and I'm looking forward to see what he can do against Ole Miss, which has a really horrible defense that I'll talk about later. But Franks definitely is going to have to do what he's been doing all season to beat Ole Miss. Now, the running game still needs some work. Traylon Smith stepping up big for the Rakeem Boyd. Rakeem Boyd was out week 3, and then he got injured on week 2. However, Traylon Smith, 41 carries for 167 yards this season, and Boyd had 19 carries for 49 yards before his injury. The whole team, however, is averaging 2.4 yards per game and 86 yards per game, which is definitely something that needs to be improved upon because run defense in the SEC necessarily isn't that good. There's a lot of good secondary guys in the SEC. Even though defense in the SEC has been pretty low on a whole, I think run defense is a lot worse in the SEC, and definitely having Boyd back will help the running game. Like I've said the last few episodes, I wouldn't necessarily judge the running game of the Razorbacks yet because of the fact that we were missing Boyd. And obviously when you have a guy take RB1 reps all throughout the summer camp and everything, he's not going to perform as well when he's injured or whenever you have the running back 2 and the team's just not going to do as well. So it makes sense why we have some running back issues, but Ole Miss game will definitely be a testing point for this running crew. No rushing touchdowns at all, though, which is definitely something we're going to have to do because I remember Rakeem Boyd getting a ton last year under Chad Morris, even though that offense was horrible. Definitely something that Razorbacks need to start trying to incorporate a little bit. But 2 things with the running game is stop using QB like scrambles and QB rushes on like the 1 or 2 yard line. It just doesn't make sense. There's no reason to put Malik Hornsby or KJ Jefferson in there to try to run some trick play because it hasn't worked. I haven't seen any sign of it able to work. I haven't seen any sign that it's actually going to do anything. So just roll with Franks, and if Franks needs to run, he can run. Franks is a mobile quarterback. He showed that against Auburn, and I definitely think that those plays have to stop. And another one of those trick plays is the reverses to TJ Hammonds. They just haven't been working. TJ Hammonds going to the wide receiver position this offseason. Just the double reverses and reverses have not been working out at all. And I think just those need to be cut from the playbook until we can actually run them in a game. I mean, I guess if you cut it, you can't run it. But just stop. Lots of options at wide receiver, though. De'Vion Warren has 10 catches for 223 yards and 3 touchdowns. Not even listed as a starter at the beginning of the depth charts on week 1. So he's been stepping up big for the injured Treylon Burks. Before Burks' injury, though, he had 8 catches for 112 yards and 1 touchdown. Mike Woods playing really good with 12 catches, 150 yards and 1 touchdown. Those 3 wide receivers are definitely guys to be watching. And it should be interesting to see how the Razorbacks play the tight end, if they go with Blake Kern or Hudson Henry. The 2 guys we've been seeing, the depth chart list, Henry or Blaine Toll. We haven't seen Toll at all. However, Henry was banged up against Mississippi State, so he did not play against Auburn, so it'll be interesting to see what we do at tight end. And I'll talk about all of the injuries to this offense and defense later. But Trey Knox hasn't been playing that good. 4 catches for 33 yards with 2 drops. I mean, until he can really play in the SEC and hold onto the football, it just doesn't make sense to put him out there. I think he has a lot of raw talent, though, and I think that Justin Sepp and Coach Pittman and everybody on the offense will be able to develop that, but until we can see that he is going to be good and can hold on to the football in the SEC, there's no reason of playing him. However, I definitely think there's a bunch of other guys who are going to start over him until he fixes those issues. Defense, though, looking pretty good. Out of all the defenses in the SEC, Arkansas is probably on the top 7 of them, averaging 27 points per game let loose. Leading the SEC in tackles, though, overall. And we have 3 guys in the top 5 for tackles. Those 3 guys being linebacker Bumper Poole with 36 tackles, defensive back Jalen Catalin with 36 tackles, and linebacker Grant Morgan with 33. And keep in mind, Morgan and Poole both played with injuries. However, there's not a lot of pressure being applied, but I just think that's the way that Odom's defense work. I really don't doubt the defense that much, and that's kind of good to say after we saw John Chavis run a horrible defense at Arkansas the last few years. When I see the defense come onto the field, I have a pretty good sense of mind that we're going to be able to get a stop, and we're going to have guys like Fucha and a couple other dudes make a big tackle or something, and definitely having really good tacklers in Poole, Catalin, and Morgan is very key to having a good defense. And Odom seems like the type of guy who trusts his defense. He puts them out there. He's like, I trust you to do your job. He doesn't micromanage them, and that's what we've been seeing so far this season for the Razorbacks. Razorbacks are averaging 255 pass yards allowed per game at 155 rushing yards allowed per game. Pass defense has been really good, defending against the Mississippi State air raid by Coach Leach. However, rushing was doing pretty good until we got absolutely demolished by Tanks Bigsby and that Auburn run offense, which I talked about last episode. But with this defense, Ole Miss's offense is really good. Matt Corral, the leader of it, is an insane quarterback, might be one of the best in the SEC. Coach Kiffin runs a great offense over there at Ole Miss, and I know he didn't come to Arkansas, and sure, we all have our opinions on whatever happened during that coaching search, but regardless of what happened, he was being looked at Arkansas because of how good of a coach he is, how good of an offensive scheme he runs, and overall, I think that it's going to be a little bit harder for Odom. It's probably going to be Odom's toughest challenge this year. Playing Mississippi State was definitely hard, but in my opinion, I don't think the air raid is that good, and I think it's easily defendable. Kentucky allowing 0 points from the air raid. All they got was a safety beating Mississippi State, so I just think LSU had a really bad game plan, and I think Bo Pelini is not a great defensive coordinator. But anyway, we're here to talk about the Razorbacks. And another reason this defense hasn't been that good is because of injuries. We've had multiple injuries on both sides of the football, offense and defense. However, we've had a ton on defense just because of how much bigger guys are in the SEC. Arkansas obviously undercoached and underdeveloped the last few years, and they weren't able to get as much reps in during the offseason due to COVID-19, so that definitely has effect on tackles and injury and things like that when other teams are so much bigger and better than us because they frankly been able to actually develop players and have them get bigger and stronger over the offseason. However, the last 2 years under Coach Morris, I would doubt any of that actually happened. So that's a big part to do with the injuries. And then like the thing is with COVID, when you don't have guys taking reps, that's kind of just what happens. Special teams, though, has to improve. Special teams was horrendous, to say the least, against Auburn. Arguably cost us the game, if you don't want to count the ref decisions. But anyway, there was multiple illegal formation penalties on punts, multiple false start penalties on punts, and those are just 5 yards and first downs that you can't be giving away. All we literally have to do is just learn how to punt. I don't understand this. Scott Fountain, hired as the special teams coordinator, talked about why special teams isn't clicking, but for anybody who didn't listen to that last episode, basically COVID and injuries because we have less depth. We're playing a lot of walk-ons and not as strong players on the special team side of the ball because we don't want to have injuries to our main guys. So special teams isn't that good because those players, frankly, just aren't as good, and I have no doubt in my mind that Coach Morse didn't really do much with them on special teams or anything, as there was a lot of rumors going around about the walk-ons. But that era is moved on. Another thing that costed Arkansas the game was the Auburn touchdown. They had a blocked punt for a touchdown. That's just 7 points you can't put on the board and expect to win a game like that. And we also missed a PAT on a botched snap. And sure, it's just one PAT, but after that missed PAT, we went for 2 2-point conversions, which ultimately failed both times. And if you want to look at it, that's 3 points we left off the board, and we lost by 2. So if we kick each PAT, we'd be realistically winning the football game. Sure, Auburn would have probably ran something else to try to get the touchdown. But anyway, that's just points you can't be letting off the board in special teams. That's just the biggest thing is special teams has to be better if we want to play in the SEC. Other schools have very good special teams, and it just seems like each week the Arkansas Razorbacks have a very rough special teams unit. Kick and punt returns are horrible for us. We've taken one punt return for -1 yards, one kick return for 10 yards, so we don't even return the ball, which is smart in my opinion because of how bad the special teams unit is. And then we're averaging like 33 yards on a punt, which is not good at all. And then the kickoffs are like line drives. They don't really get in the air as much, and we had 2 of those go out of bounds. That's just giving up field position on your defense. Overall, special teams is just not a point where we need to be taking hits with everything that's happening with our new offense and defense. Special teams have to be more well-rounded if Arkansas wants to win this game, no doubt in my mind. Now the Lane train is rolling into Fayetteville after they kept it pretty close with Bama. Bama pulling away at the end. Ole Miss averaging 42 points per game. Very impressive number. They have a 55% third down rate, and quarterback Matt Corral is actually doing really, really good. Probably one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC right now. Yes, you heard that right. One of the best offenses Arkansas has faced all year is going to be Ole Miss. Corral is 67 out of 88 for 1,080 yards with 9 touchdowns and 1 interception, averaging 370.7 yards per game. Very impressive numbers from him. And overall, he can throw the ball and run the ball. I'll talk about his running ability later, but it seems like these type of QBs have always gave Arkansas problems. So it's definitely going to be important that we're going to be able to stop one of them because of how bad our defense has done against dual-threat quarterbacks all year. Corral is just probably going to give the defense some issues. Rushing, though, is doing really well for Ole Miss, averaging 192 yards per game. Jerion Ely has 45 carries for 243 yards with 4 touchdowns, 5.4 yards per carry. And they kind of seem to have a split backfield with Snoop Connor, 37 carries for 179 yards and 4 touchdowns. They have a mobile QB in Matt Corral, 49 carries for 141 yards. And to put that in perspective, he has 6 less carries than the leading running back. I meant to say 39 carries, but regardless, that's very, very impressive from Corral on the ground. It's definitely something Arkansas is going to have to watch out for because you remember Juwan Mathis and Stenson Barrett ran all over the Hogs week 1. Definitely something that Arkansas is going to have to watch out for all game. But the receiving core of the Ole Miss Rebels is dangerous. Wide receiver Elijah Moore is a beast. 31 catches for 462 yards and 1 touchdown. I've not seen anybody with that high of a number. Almost half of Matt Corral's yards have been to Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore, a beast. Definitely going to be a guy that the Razorbacks are going to have to lock up. Tight end Kenny Yabea has 15 catches for 355 yards and 4 touchdowns. Seems to be one of Corral's favorite targets, especially in the red zone. So when we get into the red zone, that's going to have to be a guy that the Razorbacks lock up. And the Ole Miss defense doesn't exist. They are averaging 641 yards given up per game, passing